So I'm excited about this interview. Martin Rooney is the founder of Training for Warriors. He's an internationally recognized trainer, speaker, author, and pioneer of strength conditioning. He's a four-time all-conference, four-time MVP performer in track and field at Furman. He's a former member of the U.S. bobsled team. Formerly was a partner at the Parisi Speed School, where he developed one of the top NFL combine training programs in the country, produced some of the fastest athletes, and specifically the fastest athlete in the 01, 04, 05, and 06 NFL combines. He had over 130 athletes that he has trained specifically for the draft, including number 2 overall pick Chris Long. Oh, and he's also in his free time written 8 books, including his latest release, Coach to Coach, which he's going to talk about with us today. So, okay, I'm done with that. Everybody, we know we're living in difficult, challenging times right now, and most of all, I believe we don't just need leaders, we need great coaches, and now more than ever. There's nobody better to kick off the Bring It In podcast series than Martin Rooney. So, let's get started. Martin, let's say we wave a wand and now automatically you're the head of sales of your favorite team, the New York Yankees. What's the number one thing when it comes to coaching and developing others that you would say leaders today should stay away from?
That the first thing would be, you see how it's like, if I was the head of sales for the Yankees, and it's almost like we got to change the pronouns. See, if it's I'm the head of sales, all of a sudden I've aspired to this position. It's about me, me, me. The biggest mistake is I just see that people aren't focused on everybody else and developing them. That person would be more concerned about always promoting that they're the head of sales of the Yankees versus working with everybody else to make sure that the Yankees sell more tickets than anybody else. So again, I think it's very interesting that you got to really work on yourselves first before you can develop anybody else. And it doesn't come overnight. Like it took me, everything that I just talked about took me 30 years to learn. But you got to start doing the work now or it's never going to happen. So I think if anybody right now was thrust into that position and they're not really prepared for themselves, they're going to have a really, really big problem. So I think that would be the biggest mistake would be they have not done the deep work on themselves, and people are going to see right through it when it's time to lead.
That's great, Martin. I think when I think about coaching, one of the things you do at a very high level very well is you connect with athletes. How do you approach breaking the ice with someone that you coach? Think of it as breaking the ice that you align interests. What are the things that you do so well that you think people can take away from?
Listening is one of the greatest leadership skills of a coach. Take them to coffee and you pay for it. And then sit there and say, who are you? What do you believe? What do you like? Where are you from? A leader, unfortunately, thinks it's about sending information down the chain. To be a great leader, you got to bring the information up the chain. And it's a big part of the book that I wrote. In the story, guys, it's a coach and he thinks he knows what everybody wants. And then he realizes when he starts meeting with them, man, that's not what they wanted at all. And then when he was able to help them get closer to what they wanted, AKA close the gap, then they started to have success. A leader has to listen. It's a way harder skill than you think. I wasn't always a great listener. And whether it's really looking at eye contact, verbal postures, really taking in the information, clarifying, and then being able to use that and then help somebody with that, there's a lot that goes to that. But that would be my biggest advice is you would have to find out what your people want and then figure out how to help them get it instead of them you just telling them what you want, and that doesn't align with the language they're speaking.
So, Martin, I've had a lot of coaches that have inspired me over the years. Who's the coach that inspired you the most growing up?
My mom was the phys ed teacher, so that's probably not a big surprise. She was always like, you get enough sleep, you eat right, you exercise. So she hammered that into me when I was a kid. In 7th grade, they made the decision that, because I went to something called junior high, all the 7th graders weren't going to get to tryouts. There was just no baseball that year because they already had enough 8th graders and 9th graders. And I was just crushed, like, no sports. What am I going to do? And this track guy was standing outside the room because he knew that was what they were telling everybody. And he was standing outside the room. Every kid that walked out, he told him, hey, you look great for track. I said, the only thing I could think of at the time, I said, track. And he goes, yeah. And I said, what's that? What is it? But if I sound great, I want to try it. And I went out for track the next day. 7 years after that, that was the scholarship to college. changed my life, and I'm a track coach today. And I'm still in touch with him. He still comments on all my Facebook posts 40-something years, almost 40 years later. And I don't know, it was like that was the guy. I dedicated the new book to him. And that was a really cool thing because he didn't know that till he got the book. And he was, guys, sometimes you don't know how good of a job you've done as a coach until maybe 30 years later when something like that happens. But yeah, to answer it, that was the guy. And he showed me so much of what it meant to be a great coach and leader. And now looking back, those are still a lot of the lessons that I'm trying to use today.
Martin, there's been a lot of talk about generation gaps. We got millennial this, Generation Z that, boomer this, Gen X that. What's the biggest change as a leader that you've seen as a coach today versus maybe back in the day?
Leadership does change, and it changes with the people that are in front of you. You got to lead the people in front of you. Leadership isn't a cookie cutter, say this, then do that. It's who's in front of you. Age, male, female, like what type A, type B, whether we say millennial, generation. And but what I will say, what has changed in my coaching, now it has definitely become way more about engagement and everybody getting a little more autonomy and a choice than it was about me just like, you go run laps and you do what I say, you're weak, I'm tough. And hey, I grew up in that, right? Like I grew up in the 70s and 80s. You got smashed by your coaches and you just took it, but they wrecked a lot of people. That's not how it works. So just like our nutrition has changed, they used to deprive us water and give us salt tablets. We don't do that anymore. We're smarter. They used to make us do what were called nutcracker drills where we're knocking each other out. Like now there's concussion protocols. Things have gotten better, right? And our leadership has to get better too. And that's because things change. And what's interesting though is this book was the answer to that, where I show people what I believe is the new stage of leadership. And that's about making engagement and making a connection and really understanding it. Doesn't mean you can't still know the X's and O's, but you got to know who the X's and O's are and coach that person for what they need.
That was Martin Rooney, a leader, a coach, some pretty powerful points. One of the things that I wrote down and I'm going to take away today was about leading the people in front of you. I thought that's super timely. It's something everybody could take something away from. And man, it's super important right now. So that's all we got from Martin in this episode of Bring It In. Now, back to work.